Hey guys, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Boggier. I am the CEO and owner of Mountain View Veterinary Hospital here in Denville, New Jersey. And this is,
I'm Christy. I'm a technician here. I've been here for 8 years. So
and she's the manager of inpatient operations.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Today we're going to talk about pet insurance, and there's a few things I want to say before we even get into it. And the first thing is that I'm not paid by a pet insurance company. I don't get anything from it. I'm not here to promote any particular pet insurance at all. We're just going to kind of answer some of the questions that have come through to us over the last few years that keep coming and coming to us. So we kind of want to give that information out as much as possible. So here we go. So the one thing we want to think about when it comes to pet insurance is it is an investment in your future. For instance, you don't want to think that this is something that, how much can I get out of this policy? That's not the point, because if you're getting something out of the policy, that means there's something wrong with your pet. What you're trying to do is put in safeguards so that if something does go wrong, you then have something to rely on. Christy and I are going to have a ton of real world examples for you. So it doesn't matter what their age is, but we are going to talk about how that affects what pet insurance you get and what your premiums might be. The most important thing is you want to start young. In our practice, every puppy or kitten that comes in, we talk about pet insurance. And the reason why we do this is not because we want you to, sign up with us or anything like that. We want to make sure that you are aware that at this date, your pet is totally healthy and there are no pre-existing conditions that we need to be worried about at all. Your premiums are usually a lot less and you are covered for literally everything. However, we're going to talk about some other things when it comes to if you have a 1-year-old pet or a 2-year-old pet or adopted or rescued. Some people say, oh, I'm just going to put money in a savings account. Well, the problem is, particularly when you have a young pet, we have an example here that is, let's say you started saying, I'm going to put $50 away a month just in case there's a problem. So let's say your 6-year-old dog swallows a sock, which happens more often than you might think, and the surgery is $4,000. Of course, we're in New Jersey, so if you're somewhere else, it may be less than that. And you've been putting away $50 a month, you have 300 bucks. Whereas you're covered and, depending on which policy you get, a large portion of that will be covered as far as the surgery and aftercare and things like that.
Yeah, it's just very tragic if there's something called an economic euthanasia, essentially where something major happens and you don't have either the money saved or if you don't have insurance, some of these treatments can run into the several thousands. And some people just may not have it. So it's just a question of like they may want to and just don't have it. And these plans just help you not have to face that question or situation.
Yeah. Not have it based on money. And I'm going to give you an example with my own dog. My German Shepherd perforated his intestine. He had a gastric ulcer and he needed surgery immediately. And so I wound up taking to a referral hospital. They gave me an estimate for $17,000 and said he has a 50-50 chance of surviving. This dog was very important to me. And if I did not have pet insurance, I could not take that gamble. I don't have, believe it or not, I don't have 17 grand to gamble with on my pet's life. Mm-hmm. But having that insurance really helped me to say, go ahead and do it. He did great and they saved his life and I'm very happy for it. But I got to tell you, real world, I couldn't sign off on that. It's a lot of money. So pre-existing conditions. You need to keep in mind that if you're getting a pet insurance policy and you have, let's say your pet came in, you have a 1-year-old dog and he had come in because at one point he was limping for one reason or another. If you get a policy after that, that insurance company may exclude anything that has to do with that leg. And whether or not it was just a sprain or strain, or it was actually the beginning of a cruciate injury, we don't know, but anything that's pre-existing, even as simple as you come in and you say he's scratching at his ears, that can exclude you for all allergies. So you kind of want to keep that in mind when you are getting these policies, but that does not necessarily mean that you shouldn't get pet insurance. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I think we're going to go into it in a minute. For instance, you can get some of those pre-existing conditions removed, based on not having any symptoms for a certain length of time. If you have a pet who has, let's say, did blow out his cruciate or does have chronic allergies, you still want to get insurance because there's so many other things that can happen to your pet. God willing not,
Yeah.
but you want to make sure that you're covered. So sure, they can cover the allergies, but you know what? Then your pet winds up getting, hit by a car, my God, and all of that is covered, but they're not going to cover the allergies.
I think that sometimes the first time people really think about it is when they come in and they're faced with like a large estimate for something like, oh, I should, think about going out and getting pet insurance. Exactly. In that case, it's not going to cover anything that you've already been given an estimate for, or that's already been noted. But we had a dog named Alfred. He was 2 years old when he was signed up, but the owner had him since he was a little puppy. She didn't really know about insurance. In that time, he had been diagnosed with pretty significant allergies. So anything related to allergies wasn't covered. However, she still got the insurance anyway, and he got major mobility issues, and also GI stomach issues, which was very expensive to keep up with if she had to deal with that also. So, he had a lot of different things, but she was able to at least, get help with two really big conditions. So, one wasn't covered, but yeah, it ended up being well worth it, for this pet. So just something to think about.
Right. It's what is going to happen to your pet in the future. You can't do anything about what happened in the past, but looking forward, there are exclusions, but not necessarily there's so many other things that unfortunately could be happening in the future. So if you have an adult dog that you want to go ahead and have pet insurance on, the first thing you want to do is submit your pet's existing vet records upon enrollment. So let's say you say, I'm going to get pet insurance, here's all my pet's records. At that time, they're going to review them and let you know what's going to be excluded. And that's important to know, and it's also important to know that you have that in writing. You may have a dog, again, we reach for allergies because it's not uncommon, particularly in Frenchies. And so those may be excluded, but everything else is game. Everything else, neurologic problems, orthopedic problems, fractured tooth. There's so many other things that could be covered. So it's not necessarily just because you have an older dog and they already have allergies that is something that you may not want to look into.
And, I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more in some of the other slides as well, but essentially getting that full rundown from the insurance company, whoever you end up going with, really making sure you give them, everything that you have for history, and giving them a chance to review that and coming back to you with a list of conditions. Every company might be a little bit different how they do it. They might do it by diagnosis. They might just do it by whatever is noted. But as long as you have that list, you kind of have a framework to work with, kind of knowing what to expect about what might be excluded or what might you be able to get reevaluated later, or maybe even something that could potentially be contested. So there could be some options as long as you know kind of at the beginning what they're saying is excluded. Then if like 2 years down the road, you kind of get, oh, no, you weren't covered for that. You have something in writing from them at the beginning saying what they said was an excluded condition, basically.
Also, if you have an underlying chronic, I don't want to say chronic condition, but we had an example of a cat who had a severe reaction to an anti-inflammatory after having had a dental procedure, and it put the cat into kidney failure. Well, it was a very young cat. The cat recovered beautifully, and then we've had blood work done on this cat year after year, and everything's been within normal limits. So she then resubmitted it to the insurance company and said, can I have this taken off as far as kidney disease? And they took it off because it was a condition that happened, it was addressed, it resolved, and then that's the end of it. So there's lots of things that you can kind of take into consideration. And of course, we're always here to help you, but I just don't want it to be a barrier to you thinking about things like pet insurance. Ugh. So let's say you adopt a dog, right? And it's you get him from the shelter, and you know he's had like this problem and that problem, but or he he's presented to you and he looks like, maybe he has some arthritis and this and that. But you don't have any records on the dog. They found him in Texas and he was shipped up here. So what you want to do is bring that pet into the veterinary hospital and have that baseline established. As it says on there, if we rate, let's say it's a 2-year-old dog and really looks great, sure, he lived in, another area and, maybe didn't have the best vet care or wasn't treated, as well as he should have. If we wind up writing down he's healthy and has no issues, that is your baseline. Now, occasionally, as it says there, you might write mild tartar, or you might have a slight limp. Then that means that they're going to exclude everything that has to do with the mouth and also with the limping. But you do want to ask, the more questions you can ask of your provider, the better. So you want to ask for a list of exclusions, because I've seen those vary widely. For instance, a French Bulldog. All right, so Frenchies are adorable. They're everybody loves them because they're so stinking cute. But health-wise, they can have a number of problems. I've had a few. I think most Frenchie people know that you need to get pet insurance, but I have had a few Frenchies who come in and the owner's like, oh my God, they want $300 a month for pet insurance. You're going to spend that every month just on the physical exam and other things. Very rarely do we have something like a Frenchie that doesn't have a gazillion medical bills. So I know in the outset, it looks like it's a lot of money, which of course it is. But when you start adding things up, it's the best way to go. And you kind of have to look at it, even if you don't have a French Bulldog, you kind of want to think about that. I have put all my dogs in when they were younger. I had 3 dogs and 2 cats. And I think at that time, I was paying about $100 a month, which is like nothing if you consider all those pets. Then I got an adult female who was about 5 years old. She didn't have any problems, but she was 5 years old. Her alone was $120 a month. But you know what? I've had her less than a year now, and she's already paid for her policy because she had skin issues, she had this, she had that, and it's like you just don't know. So yes, I'm paying more for her because she's a little bit older, but in the outset, they've covered quite a bit already that I wasn't even expecting. I thought she was just going to be a kooky hound dog.
And in the getting that full list of conditions and exclusions, you just want to remember to ask about breed-specific exclusions that have nothing to do with anything they've seen on your pet. So like if it was a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, they could have, depending on the company, they may have an exclusion for, heart issues or something. So, just depends, and you can kind of tailor, your specific situation to finding the right match for yours. So if you have there are some companies that don't have any breed exclusions and some that do. So just something to keep in mind.
That is an excellent thing to mention, because particularly with Cavalier King Charles, they can have problems with their heart. And we did have a client come in where their pet insurance excluded everything with the heart. And it is definitely something that you want to think about. If you have a pure breed, you want to Google what the most common things you can see in that pet, and make sure if you're getting an insurance policy, you want to make sure with them, do you cover this? Do you cover that? They're pretty forthcoming, but save everything too. Just so you have that written documentation. Mm-hmm. And one other caveat I wanted to make about we're not going to lie for you. I'm so sorry. I get clients in all the time and they're like, can you just not put that? I can't. It's a medical record. I'll lose my license. So as much as I love my clients, I'm not going to lose my license because of client. So, please don't ask us that. It puts us in a very uncomfortable position. Step-by-step insurance playbook. So, all right, so you got this dog. Maybe you know their history or you don't know their history. The first thing you want to get is any paperwork they have. If it's a rescue, you want to get any kind of documentation that they've been, whatever veterinary hospitals they've been to, and then you want to insure them first. Get the policy and get the baseline exam. And at that time, there's usually a window where you can't have any kind of insurance, which is hugely important. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We want to talk to them about things like Trupanion.
Oh yeah. So essentially depending on what your situation is. So your pet may come with number of records, may come without any records. But this baseline exam will start the clock for you. So if you're getting Trupanion at yourself on your own, there will be a particular waiting period depending on if there's an illness or an injury that comes up. Sometimes that's 14 days, and you have to get them seen within 14 days, but sometimes there's a longer waiting period. But getting them seen within that 14-day window basically allows your clock to start. So that if you do have a waiting period, depending on the company, you can get that clock running faster. So, we have an offer from Trupanion essentially that lets you have no waiting period, but most of the time you're going to have to go through something. So the sooner you get them in, get the records in, get them reviewed, get all these paperwork pieces rolling, get the exam done, kind of get the list of any possible exclusions, the quicker you can kind of start the clock on any waiting period you may have. So that we had one case where a waiting period was started. It was a 14-day waiting period for the insurance to kick in. They came in for the exam maybe a week after they got the pet. And about 13 days later, GI issues started, and they excluded every GI issue going forward, essentially. Yeah.
It's a team member.
And it was like by a number of hours.
Yes.
So, yes.
So you have to keep those things in mind. And the reason why we even mention a company like Trupanion is because right now that's the only company who has that kind of offer. If you're a hospital that has been approved by Trupanion, you come in, if everything looks like it's okay, we give you the offer and they give you the policy for 30 days. And you want to go ahead and discuss like that one situation that we had?
Yes. We had a little corgi puppy who came in. They had their exam. Everything was looking good on the physical. We were able to get them started, help them get started with an offer from Trupanion.
The minute you hit that accept button, you are covered, as opposed to if you went, on your own, there's going to be like a 14 or 30-day waiting period.
Yes, like this one, it's the only way to get no waiting period. All of them have anywhere from some of them are 2 days for injury, 14 days for illness. Some are 5 days for injury, 30 days for illness. So if anything happens, like even after your first exam, if you don't get in with something with a waiting period, you gotta wait a little bit. But in this case, they were covered like as they walked out the door. They accepted the little offer that they got emailed to them. They were covered immediately. Like the next day, the pet fell off the couch, broke his leg. He had to get splinted, and then he had to have lots of splint visits after that. It was definitely hundreds, if not, over 1,000 to get the pet treated. And if I talked to Dr. Schneider earlier, and she's like, when she worked in emergency, she saw a couple of pets that had either a foreign body or something major. They got in with a trial period insurance, and say like a week later something happened and they were covered for. She remembered one that covered like $20,000 of hospitalization, just getting that 30-day coverage.
Yeah. I also, on the other end of the spectrum, I had somebody who they came in for the regular visit, and everything was fantastic. We told her about the offer. We strongly recommended that they did that. And they didn't. The 5 days later, the dog started to seizure, and now that's it. Absolutely nothing is covered with seizures. And my heart absolutely went out to them because, this dog, hopefully it's a short-term issue, but likely it's going to be a long-term issue, and it's absolutely going to be excluded, not just from any pet insurance company. And, it's devastating. It was a relatively young dog who otherwise had no conditions whatsoever. So the younger, the better. But even if you have a little bit of an older dog, that's not necessarily a reason not to look into pet insurance.
And these, the reimbursement rate deductible. So it's a balance between what you're gonna, how much you get back for each condition. If they have kind of a limit on how much you can get back, the deductible, so you'll have to meet a deductible before your insurance kicks in. And then so it's just, that will give you a premium number. So some of them are very straightforward. They don't give you much flexibility. You might have a 90% reimbursement rate on everything you submit, but you might have a higher premium for that, or the deductible that you have to meet first is higher. say you only get 70% back, that might help you bring down the premium. So it's kind of a balance between those three different things, essentially.
The other thing to keep in mind is that some policies will have an annual deductible. So let's say your pet has kidney disease and you need to, he's managed every year for this condition. Every year you need to hit that deductible. Other policies have a per illness deductible. So your pet is diagnosed with kidney disease, everything going forward, once you hit that deductible, everything going forward is covered. So, however, those ones that are covered like that, they're typically more expensive per month. So again, like Christy said, it's kind of like this. Now, I did have a client who got a very inexpensive policy. I don't remember even which one it was. Young cat, like super young. She got it. It was like $10 a month. When the cat was 1.5 years, broke its tooth. Like, what 1-year-old cat breaks their flipping tooth? They paid like 70% of it. And I mean, honestly, she paid probably less than $100 into the policy, and they covered everything, 70% of what went on. So it's a lot of work, but these are kind of some of the things that you have to keep in the back of your mind that are very, very important.
Yeah, and specifically for dental, because a lot of them say that they don't cover routine dentistry or just like a regular scaling, or they'll only cover dentistry if you've been demonstrating that you've been taking care of the teeth. So these are just things to note, about your policy, like what do I need to show in order for them to cover that? And then sometimes it could be just how something's phrased. Saying that there's a dental issue, could mean kind of anything. You could have an abscess tooth, a broken tooth, mild tartar, that all could be in the dental realm, but you could get your insurance company to maybe give you a little bit more specifics on what they're really excluding. Like, what is the note that you saw? What, why did you exclude, everything related to that? Or you might be able to get some clarification essentially from the company. If the wording maybe on the note was a little vague, or, if they're kind of blanket excluding a whole category of stuff,
We just recently had a pet in who broke his tooth, and broken teeth are almost always covered, like not an issue. This pet in had a history of having fractured another tooth in the past, and which I believe is also covered. But then when they submitted this one, they started talking about periodontal disease and this and that, and so I had to write a letter that indicated that this dog broke his tooth and it needed to be repaired, blah, 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 and hopefully they'll find a satisfying action to that. But I mean, there are things like this that you would never imagine would necessarily happen, just like the little kitty.
Mm-hmm.
But it does happen, and quite honestly, things like that you don't anticipate, and they are very expensive. When we have to extract teeth, that is hugely expensive. That's why we're always trying to get people to clear their teeth before they turn into problems. But yeah, so that's another thing. Dentistry is a very slippery slope. I do have had clients tell me that they cover dentistry. I honestly don't remember which policies they are or that sort of thing, but all these things you need to keep in consideration. I have another client whose dog was diagnosed with juvenile periodontitis. Now look, this is a genetic condition, but they had pet insurance. So everything with that dog, and that dog had to come in, he's had a lot of dental work done, but he's been covered because they got the pet insurance when he was a young dog. So.
And the direct pay. So this is Trupanion is one that we have frequently had a lot of our clients pick up because it has a very high reimbursement rate at 90%. It's an accident, illness, and injury plan, so they don't do any wellness ever. So it's not like an add-on. So in that way, it's very simple to kind of get. It's a per condition deductible. So that's helpful if, say, like, maybe your pet has diabetes, and that's the only thing that ever really comes up for that pet. They pay that, deductible once, and then you're kind of good for the rest of that pet's life for that issue. For maybe a younger pet who gets into this, it gets into that, it gets a little, sometimes a yearly one is a little better, but Trupanion has it per condition one. And they can pay us directly, or they can pay a vet directly. There are a couple, we did look into that a little bit. Another one called Pets Best, another one called Healthy Paws, ASPCA. They have a variation of direct pay, but Trupanion is the most straightforward direct pay. The other ones you kind of need pre-approval, and you might even have to have it kind of set up in advance where they send a check. So they're a little bit more complicated, but I would say most of them you get reimbursed for. It's just Trupanion's one that you have the option of having them pay us directly, so you don't have to put anything out upfront.
You know what we didn't mention is that pet insurance is a reimbursement type insurance. Unless you have one of those direct pay kind of options. Typically, you need to pay the bill, and then they reimburse you. Now, most companies, not all, but most companies, typically, if you submit that invoice, you're going to get that payment within a relatively short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually tell clients that, by the time your credit card bill comes in, you have the money to kind of pay off what you did.
Yeah.
So that's what I did with. But it's kind of, that's very important to know, because a lot of people may not know that that's how it works. They may think that it's like human medicine, and it's not. So
and the one thing about the direct pay that is nice, if you do think about doing something like Trupanion, is if you had a very serious situation happen. I mean, this one here that's noted is a payout for 153,000. That may be one that you just can't pay upfront. Like there is no way to
right.
And it could be any range of numbers. I mean, I know like sometimes a hospital stay could be 10,000 just for a couple days.
Yes.
So just something to consider if you think you may not have that flexibility. At least this does give an opportunity to have a direct pay to us through we have a software set up for essentially.
The doctors and I have been talking about this, and veterinary medicine, the costs have absolutely exploded, and I'm not going to go into the reasons why that may or may not have happened. And honestly, we're at the point now where like having a pet is almost a luxury, right? I mean, it used to be, okay, you get a dog, and you do this, and everything is fine. But having that underlying safety net is extremely helpful, because we've seen heartbreaking cases, absolutely heartbreaking cases where it didn't have to be that way had they had pet insurance. We recently had a very young dog that had a foreign body, and it went too long, and unfortunately the pet passed away. And that's just it's so heartbreaking. So when you get a pet, you need to understand that that's a responsibility that you need to keep in your mind.
And I think sometimes you wait a little bit thinking, is it going to go away? Is that limp going to resolve? Or is that, stomach issue going to end on its own? And maybe you won't wait as much when you have that safety net. So I think that's one of the things to consider, is sometimes it's like, oh, do I need to rush into it? If you're going to have coverage or help with the coverage, I think it just gives you that peace of mind to say, I'm just going to get something checked out. Sure. So Pumpkin is actually a little bit more, works quite a bit different actually than Trupanion, which is kind of just very straightforward. There's not a lot of options to change. But Pumpkin has a baseline essentially that does cover some stuff that Trupanion doesn't. They cover exam fees, Trupanion doesn't. They cover more dental issues, some behavior and physical therapy, which you may not get from Trupanion or some of the other ones. They have, I guess their reimbursement or situation's a little bit different if you need something more urgently. So they'll get you back your money more quickly, so you get reimbursed a little bit faster. And they also have a way to really like customize your plan. So we have a staff member here who has this, and they were able to kind of like be flexible. So as you can see, the reimbursement cap can be 10,000, which would lower your premium or your and based on where your deductible is, that could really make the coverage affordable for you. If you needed to say go with a lower cap or go with a higher deductible, or depending on how you structure the plan, you're able to kind of work on getting a premium that you can afford. So they don't just come back with like, hey, it's $120. You could say, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna raise this a little bit and reduce this a little bit, so I can get something that that works for me. And then they have and they're not the only ones, but they do have a specific feature to theirs where after 6 months, I know Nationwide does too, just offhand, but they have a specific feature where if your pet goes for 6 months without demonstrating a pre-existing condition that was noted, it can be removed directly. Some of the other ones you may be able to still do that, but they don't mention that as a feature plan.
I noticed on the slide here, it's talking about holistic and customizable care. That's another thing to take note. I hope everybody's taking notes here. I know with some of the policies, you specifically need to ask for a rider to cover alternative care. And, here, as we do integrated medicine, acupuncture, laser therapy, things like that, they aren't automatically covered. I have it on all my dogs because it's something that I do, but they don't immediately tell you about that. So also keep it, ask them, do you cover this? Because particularly, with laser therapy, that can be extremely beneficial to a lot of dogs for a lot of reasons. And you want to make sure that that's covered. So your shopping checklist. The first thing you want to do is you can ask your veterinarian and find out which providers they find are the easiest to work with. I gotta be honest with you. You know what? In my opinion, any insurance is going to be helpful. You just be careful to read the fine print. But even if they're going to cover 70%, it's 70% that of a $3,000 bill. Significant. Check payout options. That's the difference between direct pay to the hospital, which is not typically usual, but versus reimbursement based. Downloading a sample policy is always a good idea, and lock in your baseline. That is very, very important. So after you have that baseline exam, you want to contact the company and say, look, this was my exam, and make sure you know what's covered and what's not covered. One other thing I wanted to mention, oh my gosh, it escapes me right now. Older pets. If you have an older pet and you're like, he's been fine, and everything's been going hunky-dory, and they're 8 years old, do not drop your policy. I implore you. Or if you're not happy with your pet insurance company, and this is an issue, if you're not happy with your pet insurance company and you want to change, that can be a problem. Because now everything that pet's been covered for previously is now considered pre-existing.
Yep. Even the same company. Sometimes.
So you definitely want to give that a great deal of thought. It's something that I'm looking at very closely in the future, because there is a company that recently just dropped folks. Just gave them a message and said, we're no longer covering you. Fortunately, one other company did step up and say, if you had this situation, we'll take you. But it's like, again, though, I know I'm going back to the very first slide. It is something that you really want to consider, particularly if you have a brand new young dog, because veterinary medicine's gotten very expensive, and you don't want to have to make an economic decision as to whether or not you need to do something particularly critical with your pet. Think back again to my shepherd. If I didn't have it, I couldn't take that gamble. I think that's it.
Yeah, it's been great. We do have some questions that have come in.
Okay, sure.
You ready? One person, I'm sure she'll tell you who she is at the end, says, don't get a Frenchie. Noted. LOL.
Very unique.
Yes.
Very unique.
Yes. Questions. Are specialty foods or specialty meds covered by most insurers?
It depends. It all depends on what the underlying condition that it's used for. For instance, if your pet was diagnosed with crystals in the urine or previous stones that had to be removed and they need a prescription diet, those are typically covered. If your pet has had pancreatitis in the past and they need a low-fat diet, those are typically covered. But again, I hate to punt it back to you calling your insurance company, but that is something you need to actually ask them and get it back in writing, because that's important.
I know Trupanion covers prescription diets for sure, but they may cover it at a little bit of a different rate. So if you're normally getting back 90%, some types of foods or some supplemental products, they may cover it 50% or just a lower reimbursement rate.
Okay, good. Will all pet insurers accept pet exams from any vet office?
Yeah.
Okay. Do insurers increase rates if you put in many claims?
I don't know. I'm so sorry. I don't know the answer to that question.
About that. I have heard of them dropping some people, but it didn't seem related to like how many claims they had, because I feel like Jesse would have been dropped. Like, oh, sorry. We have a staff member who has a couple
Seems to have a lot
of
of lemons.
with a lot of issues, and has done really great with her insurance. I mean, it's a 70% reimbursement, but that's very same company also sort of dropped other people suddenly, so it's a little hard to figure out there.
I wish we had more information for you, but I'm sorry we don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Do the monthly premiums change every year as your pet ages?
Not necessarily as your pet ages, but they will go up just because of economics, and look, let's face it, the way that veterinary care has been going and the prices have been rising, they're getting claims. And so, they have to pay out on these claims. So of course your rates are going to increase. And look, and if it boils down to, you can't feed your kids, pay the policy, you can't pay the policy, right? But try not to get too excited about the fact that those rates are going up, because everything's going up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of life.
Yeah.
You likely will have a lower premium if you did start earlier. So, like I would say, like if you start with a puppy who's 6 months old, at 5 years old, you'll probably pay less than if you just came in at 5 years old. But hard to say there too.
Again, we recommended it at your first visit.
Mm-hmm.
Because
right. Is there a particular insurance company better for older pets? She says, I know many will drop pets when they reach a certain age.
I don't know that that's necessarily true.
Yeah.
I don't think they necessarily, but it can get more and more expensive. But I'm not going to recommend any particular company, and I honestly don't think that there's one that's any better than another. It has more to do with your own personal finances and which policies you decide to choose.
Okay. And here's a comment related to the question about if you put in a lot of claims. So one of our viewers says they hike fees even if you don't put in claims. Mine more than doubled in the last couple of years, and I never put a claim in. So.
Right. And that may have to do with economics.
I think that's the cost of veterinary care, essentially.
However, your pet's healthy. Everything's fantastic. All right, I'm going to tell you another story. So I had a client, the dog was 8 or 9, was doing great. Then wound up, I think that dog wound up having a foreign body. Yeah, he ate dirt or something very unusual, and had to have it extracted. Unfortunately, after that surgery, the pet had many, many post-op complications and ultimately wound up having to be put to sleep. The husband had canceled the policy the month before because there had been no problems with the dog. So I wouldn't want to be a fly on the wall in that room, but their total bill was $20,000. Mm-hmm. And that just because your pet is doing okay now, everybody's finances are different. Just keep in mind that because your pet is doing fine now, doesn't mean that something can't happen, in the near future.
And even Trupanion's like philosophy is about the unexpected, accident, illness, injury, things you did not plan for. They expect when you get a dog, you probably plan to pay for their annual, and some of the others have this philosophy too, but that you probably expect to pay for their annual visit, their blood work, their vaccines, and that these are things you just don't expect. So you just protecting yourself against the unknown.
That's important to know too, because there's a difference between catastrophic and wellness plans. I don't know if there's other companies that I'm most familiar with Trupanion, but they are, they're not going to pay for your vaccines or your wellness visits. They don't pay for any exams whatsoever. Excuse me. But, they're more for catastrophic, or chronic conditions. So if you need something like that, you need something to cover vaccines, and that's a whole different policy. Again, it takes education and research.
And here's a note of optimism. One person's pet actually, they received a lowered policy premium this year. So it does happen. It does happen.
All right. That is very good to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? Okay. For anyone who came in late or for everyone, I am recording. So this will be on YouTube. I'll send the link, in the next few days. And thank you, Dr. Boggier and Christy. This has been fabulous. And another good webinar. We'll see
I
what's
did want to end the
up for
webinar.
next time.
I did want to end it with the same thing I said in the front. We're not sponsored by any pet insurance companies. We're not recommending any specific companies. We're just trying to answer some of the questions that we frequently get when we're in the exam.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.